172.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Winkler's going to read it in as soon as I turn on her mic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
House Bill 172 by Representative Edmonston extends the period for which the Comite River is exempt from certain provisions of the Louisiana Scenic Rivers Act.
On your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This bill simply extends the current law, which temporarily exempts Bayou Manchac and the Comite River from the Scenic Rivers Act. This bill will allow parishes to complete very important flood work on Bayou Manchac that is decades overdue. And I'll just add a side note real quickly. I was one of the 2016 flood victims, which is why this legislation is very, very important to me. So thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chair. Questions, or we can have Mr. Sawyer elaborate for us.
Great. Thank you again, Representative Edmonston, Mr. Acting Chair, members. So what this bill, what Representative Edmonston's bill does that the Amite River Basin Commission unanimously supports is asks the legislature to preserve the status quo for just a few more years, extend current law for just a few more years. What the current law does is it exempts the Bayou Manchac and, by association, the Comite River from the Scenic Rivers Act. I want to be clear that the Amite River Basin Commission is emphatically in support of the Scenic Rivers Act, emphatically supportive of the Scenic Rivers Act. When Senator Bodie White and then later then Representative Valerie Hodges had established this law in law twice, the point was that this was right after the 2016 flood, and there was little ability to take the corrective measures to protect homes and to protect lives. And I'll remind you, in 2016, we lost 13 lives to protect homes and lives in the Amite River Basin. What has kept us from taking those corrective actions is we didn't have money. There was always will, there was always desire. We didn't have money. Now we have money. Now we have $30 million, and we have the cooperation of East Baton Rouge Parish, Ascension Parish, Iberville Parish, the Pontchartrain Levee District, and the Baton Rouge Park System, as well as the Amite River Basin Commission. I mean, that alone is historical. That never happens. We have will, we have funding, we have the ability, and the measures, which I can elaborate on if you're interested. The measures are very specific. They're very surgical, but they're also very, very important. This little waterway is the primary source of flooding for East Baton Rouge, Ascension, Iberville, and it also aggravates flooding in Livingston Parish. There may be a question, well, hey, this bill is called Comite. The original intent when this legislation was passed, again, by Senator White and then then Representative Hodges, was to address on both waterways. And to be clear, the Amite River Basin Commission does not have any projects or plans on the Comite River. However, we believed that it was strategically the right thing to do to just ask the legislature, scratch out the expiration date and replace it with a later expiration date that's timed with the expiration of our funding. And that's it. That's the only reason. And then lastly, I'll say that the Amite River Basin Commission did not feel it appropriate to speak on behalf of the City of Central Louisiana, East Baton Rouge Parish, the City of Clinton, Louisiana, and East Feliciana Parish, who may or may not have interests on the Comite River. We didn't think that that was our place. We felt like the easiest thing to ask you was just to extend the deadline, extend current law, so that we could complete this very important work on Bayou Manchac. And with that, thank you.
All right, there are a couple of questions. So we're going to start with Representative Zarang.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Sawyer and Representative Edmonston, I fully appreciate what you're trying to do. I know it's a problem and it needs to be addressed. And I think you clarified the issue, but we've been getting some questions in regard to the Scenic River Act and how does it work, but the impacts or potential impacts associated with the project. So you said that there is no planned projects on the Comite, that this is addressing outside of the Comite River?
Correct. The body of law in which Bayou Manchac was exempted from, temporarily exempted from the Scenic Rivers Act is attached to Comite. So that body of law, that law that Senator Hodges had passed, we just basically wanted to extend that. To be clear, the Amite River Basin Commission has no project plans on the Comite River. The Amite River Basin Commission has no plans. We cannot speak for the City of Central, the East Baton Rouge Parish, the City of Baker, East Feliciana Parish, and the City of Clinton. We can't speak for them. We felt like it was inappropriate for us to speak on their behalf. So, as I say, we believe that the best thing for us to ask the legislature to do is just preserve what you've already done, just extend it a little bit longer so we can complete this work.
Fully understand, and I know you appreciate the fact of how important the Scenic Rivers Act is and the benefit that it provides to areas. I know that Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is responsible for enforcement. I don't know if Cole or someone from the department has any concerns or issues, but Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, if they would have an opportunity to come up and discuss any issues related to that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Zarang. So just, I guess, a couple of points of clarification. Certainly, the flooding was a major issue on these waterways. That's why it was addressed in law. I did want to point out that there are many exceptions for the Comites, particularly. One, the Comite River Diversion Project is exempted and has been exempted. So any work that's associated with that federally permitted project is not going to be subject to scenic rivers permitting. My appreciation, Mr. Sawyer, is that the hiatus, if you will, for clearing, snagging, and dredging for Manchac is not associated with the Comite River. I think that's in 1855M. is Bayou Manchac, and I want to say that P is where the Comite is. So certainly no objection to, this extension, just appreciate that whatever protections the Scenic Rivers Act is providing regarding clearing, snagging, and dredging, those are not going to be it. And then whatever way characteristics those water bodies have when it returns, we can't guarantee it's still scenic in nature or whatever, but that would just be the only concerns from our standpoint. We'll enforce the act and whatever provisions of the act we're told to enforce on these water bodies.
So although well-intentioned, you believe and agree that what is proposed as it is right now is not going to inhibit or affect your ability to enforce or utilize the Scenic Rivers Act?
With the exception of clearing, snagging, and dredging, in which case we just would not enforce those provisions as it relates to these two particular water bodies.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Ventrella, for a question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep. Edmondson, this is the bill that we spoke about. I apologize, I was in another committee and got them confused. But this is the bill, like I stated on the record, and I think that our Metro Councilman is here to speak in support of your legislation. We appreciate you not speaking on behalf of the City of Central, but I do have, like I said, a letter from my mayor in support of this. It has been a lengthy discussion in terms of what is the best call, but after conferring with former State Senator Bodie White, who did put this stuff in place originally, they believe this is the best call for our city, just so that way, and again, there's nothing necessarily planned from the city, but as we need to do regular maintenance, let's say, a log gets lodged and we need to have access to that. If we do not extend this legislation, then to my understanding, we could potentially not be able to do that. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct.
Yes, as a matter of fact, and Mr. Garrett can elaborate on this further, but there are limited instances where there are certain activities that would be allowed, although it has to follow a permitting process, and the permitting process has nothing to do with flood mitigation. So it's a permitting process that does not deal with flood mitigation. Rightfully so, it deals with the historic and pristine nature of the water body. And so, and then also in accordance with the Scenic Rivers Act, every water body that's included in the act has to have a management plan. And to my knowledge, Comite does not have, at least not a publicly available management plan. Bayou Manchac does. And so it's clearly expressed what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what steps have to be taken in conjunction with wildlife and fisheries. So, I guess the answer is maybe. We don't know because we don't have access to a management plan for the Comite River. We would just have to feel that out with wildlife and fisheries and figure out what's allowed and what's not allowed and follow their processes. Which, look, I'll keep saying it, which is fine. We, the Amite River Basin Commission, do not have any projects. Our focus is on Bayou Manchac. But I'll also reiterate that we feel like it's inappropriate for Amite River Basin Commission to speak on behalf of the City of Central, East Baton Rouge Parish, City of Clinton, and East Feliciana Parish.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. And thankfully, I can speak on behalf of them to some degree, perhaps not everybody, but you can't always make everybody happy, although we surely try. But it was the best call that I was told from my people and from the people that know about it to go ahead and support this bill. Because again, just like you said, it's very ambiguous and we don't want to get sideways with anybody. We want to be able to continue to protect our citizens. Because like I said, 2016 resonates with us every time it rains. So if anything that we can do to help, further drainage, further keeping the rivers clear, we want to do that. So I appreciate your bill, Rep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment? We have a short letter from the mayor of Central, like Rep. Ventrella said. I'd like to get that into the record. Can I just give it to staff after?
You sure can. We'll get that in the
thank
record
you.
for you.
Thank you
Representative
so much.
Coates for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I want to be a little bit more clear. So taking the river off the Comite, taking it off the Scenic Rivers Act is for flood mitigation projects, correct? But if snagging and stuff needs to be done, you can still do that if it was returned into the Scenic Rivers Act, correct?
So a couple of clarifications on that. What the previous hiatus did and what this bill seeks to extend does not remove it from the Scenic Rivers Act entirely. It exempts it from clearing, snagging, and dredging operations, meaning you don't need a permit whatsoever. There are provisions of the Scenic River Act without this exemption that would allow for those. For instance, we allow for up to 50% snagging or removal of woody debris from a waterway. That can be a permitted activity. We allow dredging in certain instances, again, by permit, to make sure that we are retaining the scenic characteristics of it, but then allowing for navigation and drainage and those kinds of things. So the brief answer is yes, these functions can be done. They can be permitted. The Scenic Rivers Act does allow for them, but just with some oversight, again, making sure that we're maintaining the scenic nature and traditional nature of these waterways. And I will say that Bayou Manchac is not one of these, but in Section O of 1855, the Comite River is listed as a number of rivers are that shall receive a permit for drainage purposes when that permit is being requested from a local municipality or local government entity. So that is something that would be permitted. This bill simply extends the flat-out exemption where a permit would not be necessary.
But any other scenic rivers in the state would have to come and get a permit for any of this, correct?
Correct, unless they're otherwise exempted, yes.
So, Mr. Paul Sawyer, like after we spoke, I actually looked at some of the Amite River Basin Commission minutes and was kind of looking that back in the fall of, I think it might have been 24, there was a project for the Comite. And with the water initiative study, it showed that it would only reduce the flooding by like 0.3%. And so that funding was not used, and there was a lot of opposition from what I'm seeing in the minutes. So that project was not to move forward. And now you're saying that there is no project, so I really don't understand why we're continuing to keep Comite in there. Because I just feel like we're kind of showing favoritism above all of the other parishes and all the other scenic rivers in the state.
So if I may, a couple of responses to that. So first of all, the project that you mentioned was to take place in East Feliciana Parish. And the reason that it was rejected had nothing to do with scenic rivers. It had nothing to do with the beauty and pristine nature of Comite. It had everything to do with the fact that clearing and snagging above delivers water more quickly down below. And so it was going to result in flooding in East Baton Rouge Parish. So that's why that project was ultimately deemed ineligible, because it was going to flood. It was going to exacerbate flooding in East Baton Rouge Parish. And so there's that. And then, again, with respect to Comite, that project, again, that we just described, the Amite River Basin Commission with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative took that money back and is holding it to maybe try to find projects in East Feliciana Parish. That's what we committed to LWI. It's what we committed to East Feliciana Parish. We're trying to find projects, maybe on Comite, maybe not, or maybe a master plan. Some way to address flooding in East Feliciana Parish. But again, it's the reason that Comite is in there is not necessarily favoritism, because it's already law. We're not asking for anything new.
And we don't
this is current law, and we believed that the simplest thing for us to ask of the legislature was just preserve current law. We felt like it was going to be more complicated and actually more difficult to explain, especially to people in the Amite River Basin. Hey, why are you removing Comite? Hey, we have Amite River Basin Commission has no designs on Comite right now. We only want to work on Bayou Manchac. The simplest thing for us to do was to ask the legislature, cross out 2026 and replace that with 2030, which is the expiration of our funding. And last thing I'll just reiterate is that this is a temporary suspension. We have no intention of preserving an exemption for, at least Amite River Basin Commission has no intention of preserving exemptions in the Scenic Rivers Act, unless we can demonstrate a compelling need, which we would do with the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And actually, there's one last thing that I think it's important to bring up. I mentioned earlier that the permitting to allow certain flood mitigation measures on scenic rivers, it's very extensive, and it has almost nothing to do with flood mitigation. Rightfully so. It's responsible, it looks towards habitat, historical and archaeological value, botanical values, scenic values, wilderness qualities. If you look down that list, they are strikingly similar to what you would go through if you did a full-blown federal environmental impact statement, which takes about 2 years to do. And I'll add an addendum to that, and I'll be done, I'm sorry. But after 2016, we secured $50 million for Livingston Parish in what's called emergency watershed protection. This is federal funding, emergency watershed protection, $50 million. And it took us 2 years to spend emergency money because we had to disentangle ourselves from the Tickfall River, but then also disentangle ourselves with the permitting regime of the Corps of Engineers. And I know LDWF is not the Corps of Engineers, but when you stack up the permitting requirements of the Scenic Rivers Act, they are strikingly similar to the requirements of the Corps of Engineers. And how do you explain to people, a parish that almost the entire parish went underwater, how do you explain to them 2 years later, hey, we're now getting around to the emergency watershed protection efforts to clear and snag your waterways, which, by the way, has produced fantastic results for Livingston Parish. The water drains much more efficiently because of that. But it took us 2 years to get that done with the Corps of Engineers, and then also to disentangle ourselves briefly with the Tickfaw River. Thank you. That was a little bit longer than I expected. So.
And look, I appreciate that. And I have a scenic river. I had flooding. 2016, I had family members that flooded twice, in March and August. So I seen it, I lived it, I understand it. But I just feel like this is continuing to bump it and extend it when there's other communities that aren't having that. So I appreciate it. I just, I don't think it's fair. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Coates. Do we have Aaron Moak? Am I doing that one right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you come to the table? Cole, could you yield for me? East Baton Rouge Parish Metro Council. President,
sir.
And would like to speak in support. We are on the 3-minute rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. I'm not sure what time it is now, but thank y'all for allowing me to speak for just a moment. I can speak on behalf of what I consider the City of Central and East Baton Rouge Parish. I'm one that authored a bill that did snagging and clearing of the Comite River. One of the things that we were concerned about at the time, this was into 21, 22 that I introduced this. We actually generated the funding through East Baton Rouge Parish at about $3 million, and City of Central came up with $500,000 to do this project. And the reason we did that is because we didn't want to get into federal dollars and things like that to have to wait and all the permits and Corps of Engineer and all. One of the things that came up was the Scenic Rivers Act and whether we could do this work or not. And people said, well, we want to snag, clear, and dredge it. I said, I don't even want to get into dredging because then we're back to the federal issue and years of study and research so that we can scoop a spoon of sand out and then move it to a different location. So we got to snagging and clearing. And this is why I'm in support of keeping it exempt. And in fact, I know 4 years seems like a long time. I would even like to see it amended to 10 years or the Comite River removed from it. And the reason is, where City of Central and East Baton Rouge Parish is, the Amite and the Comite River are a convergence area. And if there's any snagging or if there's any logs and everything that's backing up the river, you have to clear that out. Now, we don't want to change or alter the course or the scenic value of it, but if it's causing a harm, then we as a City of Central or East Baton Rouge Parish needs the autonomy to be able to go in with permits or whatever that we need to, in associations that we have to get with, but move the resources quicker to be able to get that instead of having to go through these a lot more process to be able to snag and clear. One of the things that came up a while ago was the percentage that it was going to help. Let me tell you this, since 2016 and since we've done the snagging and clearing, and not just the co-meet, but we've started with the A-meet from Livingston Parish down because we came up with that funding also, it has made a drastic, all these rains that where you saw some of this flooding that has happened in the last several weeks and the last several months, the City of Central and a lot of East Baton Rouge Parish in the area that flooded into 2016 has not flooded. Can I tell you the water will move out? And one of the things we did, we only snagged and cleared up to the diversion canal area because we didn't want to rush all the water down to Livingston Parish and everything like was brought up earlier if you had done it up higher. So this is why I'm in support of it. I see it every day in the work that we can accomplish. And like I said, we'll take the 4 years. I would like to see it possibly amended. That's just a personal request of mine. But it does need to stay in there because of its importance of where it's at.
All right, thank you. We have a very quick question by Representative Domain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if it's going to be quick.
Yeah.
But it will definitely be, all right, so what you guys are trying to do is you're trying to get this one river exempt from having to go through permitting. Can you explain to me exactly what you're trying to do?
It's already in present law, but yeah, go ahead, Paul, and explain that to her.
So again, we're just asking the legislature to extend current law, extend the status quo. Our focus is Bayou Manchac. The Amite River Basin Commission, our focus is Bayou Manchac. We have money, we have will, things that have not existed up until now. And I think a lot of entities who seek an exemption from the Scenic Rivers Act, they have intention, but they don't have money. And now we have both. And the only reason that we're having a conversation about Comite is because Comite and Bayou Manchac were paired together when Senator Bodie White passed it, and then then again it became law, and then again when then State Representative Valerie Hodges passed it, and it became law. In both occasions, not a single vote in opposition. And just strategically, we looked at that and thought, well, that's the path. That's the way to go. Just do what ask the legislature to do what they've done twice before. And I'll keep saying it. We don't have any. Amite River Basin Commission does not have any intentions, any projects on the Comite River. We just don't feel like it's appropriate for our agency to speak on behalf of the City of Central, East Baton Rouge Parish, the City of Clinton, and East Feliciana Parish.
So why not exempt any river that could possibly have funding? I mean, why just pick and choose which areas you're able to do this with? Because I can tell you, Bayou Terrebonne hasn't been dredged. Bayou Terrebonne hasn't been cleaned. We have river flood. I mean, we have flooding. I mean, it's bayou flooding, but it's flooding. So, I mean, just because it's more populated area, or the people on our bayous are just as important as the people on your rivers. And so why is this just happening in one area and not the other? Why can't it be kind of for everywhere, for any area that happens to get funding? Because I know we have the same struggles that you guys have in our areas. And so can we talk about why is it just one and not the others?
We would agree. We would agree entirely. Okay. Bayou Terrebonne is not, as far as I can tell, is not a scenic river. And so we wouldn't be having this conversation about Bayou Terrebonne. We would be working a solution to find funding and resources for Bayou Terrebonne to be treated, as you would like. It's not a scenic river. And so we're only confining our concern, not even with all scenic rivers, we're concerned with just the scenic rivers that are pivotal to flood control in our basin. And that's it. And it's a temporary suspension. We don't want to keep this in perpetuity. We just want to be able to get in there and do the very surgical flood mitigation work in that bayou, and then get out, and then have the act come back in force again. And we would join with you and others to do everything we could to help Bayou.
So this is for any river that you're considering to be scenic in the state of Louisiana, or just in this one area?
Just in the list of scenic rivers that are included in state law, the State Scenic Rivers Act, which has a catalog of very specific rivers, we are only interested in one, Bayou Manchac, but the law that we're asking you to extend just couples the two together. It just couples Comite River and Bayou Manchac. And that's why we're only asking you to extend the deadline on that law. Again, not talking about rivers and waterways in general, not even talking about the whole catalog of scenic rivers. We're only focused on one, and current law just has it coupled with another. And we're just asking you to extend current law temporarily so we can get in and do this work and get out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to the question?
Quickly.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Great question. Look, what we did when we started this process of snagging and clearing the Comite River, and even further on with the Amite River, is our consulting, or our group that studied the river, we basically droned the whole river, the whole process of everything that was in East Baton Rouge Parish, studied every part that needed to come out, how far up the bank we could go. We set a limit as far as what was in the river and so on. What that did was, we also did that same process after the snagging and clearing of the river. So what that does is, and one of the things that came up a while ago was a management type plan, and where we have. Well, we've kind of set up something like that to where now that we've snagged and cleared it, we can do a maintenance plan to keep it snagged and cleared, to keep the water flowing and everything. Also, what it does is, if a storm comes through and it blows more limbs and everything, an abnormal amount of limbs and trees and everything into the river, that if we get designated as an emergency area through FEMA or whatever, that now automatically gets cleared to be put back to the way it was. And if these rivers, or let's take the Comite River, because that's the one we're discussing, is not included in this, then it could delay the whole process and funding and everything for us to be able to do that. But we're also looking at funding to keep the regular rivers clear of certain obstruction. Now, just because a limb falls in the river, we're not going to run out there and do something. But if it becomes an impediment, then we have the ability to do it. And that's why we're asking to continue the Comite River in this. Also, the Comite River, there's other projects that are going on with the 5 tributaries in Blackwater and Beaver Bayou, abut up to the river. And so all that is still continuing forward as part of the Comite River Diversion Canal, the 5 tributaries in East Baton Rouge Parish, and the snagging and clearing of the Comite River. So especially if we could keep it in there until those projects are done to coincide with it.
All right, so we have cards in support. Not wishing to speak, Kevin Hayes, Louisiana Landowners Association, Melinda Brown with Delcoy Corporation, Scott Kirkpatrick with the Levee Board Association, and Susie Labre. And support, not wishing to speak, if you all would yield the table for a minute for opposition. Rebecca Trish with Louisiana Wildlife Federation, Emily Vuxton with the Nature Conservancy, and Cynthia Duet with the Pontchartrain Conservancy is in opposition, not wishing to speak. But Emily and Rebecca.
Hello, my name is Emily Vuxton, and I'm the Director of External Affairs at the Nature Conservancy. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. The Louisiana Scenic Rivers Program was established in 1970, and this year it celebrates its 55th anniversary. Approximately 3,000 miles of water are designated scenic rivers in the state of Louisiana. This program protects valuable fish, wildlife, and habitats from degradation, provides flood protection, and preserves the scenic beauty of these waterways for all Louisiana citizens. Chances are many of you have scenic rivers in your parishes, and these scenic rivers are what make your parishes beautiful and also attract visitors and residents for fishing and recreation. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries helps protect these scenic rivers and provides permits for actions that take place adjacent to scenic rivers. It also provides technical support and enforcement action for parishes who are seeking to manage problems taking place in or adjacent to these water bodies. What's lost in a lot of these discussions is that a lot of things that people complain about in terms of these rivers are already things that can be permitted and can be worked with LDWF that doesn't require removing these rivers or exempting them from the program. So we always encourage authors to speak with the department on addressing the issues in their parishes before taking actions like those proposed in this legislation. We have spoken extensively with the author and Paul Sawyer about this legislation, and we appreciate their passion for addressing flooding issues in their basin. However, the Nature Conservancy opposes the removal and exemption of water bodies from this program. Rivers are connected systems. The removal of one section of a water body can have upstream and downstream effects. What happens in a lot of these water bodies, a lot of the flooding that we are experiencing are the impacts from past actions of channelization, snagging, dragging. All of those things have caused more flooding. Scenic rivers in and of themselves are not causing flooding in a lot of these parishes. We previously opposed exempting the Comite River from certain provisions of the Scenic River Program in 2018. However, legislation passed that year that removed protections for 3 years. Legislation was then passed again in 2021, extending the exemptions to 2026. This bill proposes extending the exemption for 4 more years, yet it is unclear to us why this extension is necessary. It has already been exempted for 7 years. As already mentioned by the authors, there are no project plans in the Comite, so why is this still being exempt? Even though they have been paired before, the Comite and Bayou Manchac, there's no reason why they have to continue to be paired into the future. We urge legislators to seek clarity on the necessity of this bill before passing legislation that can have unintended consequences, including increased flooding in nearby communities, bank erosion, loss of ecological diversity, and habitat loss and excessive sediment deposition. We urge you to vote no on this legislation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Trush with Louisiana Wildlife Federation, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. I know it seems complicated. We think it's very simple, that the things that they have been talking about, you are allowed to do. In 2017, there was hours of discussion in front of this committee that had different members, and I remember it well because our organization, Nature Conservancy, and many others have come to speak about these types of exceptions and removals from Scenic Rivers Act, and we don't support that. You know, Scenic Rivers, they did not cause the flooding that happened in 2016. There was 24 inches of rain that fell in 24 hours. And, you know, this is about floodplain development. These rivers were put in 1970. It's 55 years now, and this Comite and many of those North Shore rivers were put in at that time. And all of this management needs to take into account as the planning comes by how that river plays a role in flood management. But the fact is, in 2017, there was an act passed by the legislature that said you shall permit in these scenic rivers for flood management. So this is already permitted if these are the activities. One of the things, since Emily covered many of the problems with these activities, they sound like they are the right thing to do, and it is what we have been heard about managing a river, but they don't work. And for instance, someone asked about a project that was withdrawn for snagging and clearing on the Comite, the upper Comite, because the watershed initiative model showed it wouldn't work. But to us, that's a representation that if this exception continues, that those kinds of projects would just be proposed. They may not be an idea today, but in the next 5 years, that could come about. And there is less permitting process or less opportunity for local government, downstream or upstream neighbors, people who live along the river, to even have a comment on some of these activities that end up having unintended consequences about how the river functions. For example, on these exemptions that's happened to Comite River, there was a complaint by Wildlife and Fisheries about just excessive bank clearing. There were trees cut along the bank. There's pictures of them with the stump left, and what happens is that tree root is no longer holding that soil. The bank is eroding and washing into the river and silting it up, and so your river's getting wider, it's silting in, so now you want to dredge it, and you want to keep those banks clear, and they just continue to erode. You are in a cycle. And the previous chairman of the committee, Stuart Bishop, had learned that the hard way. I know it's time for me to stop, but just to say that they had studied this problem on the Vermilion River and had discovered that a lot of these pointed to activities on a river really make flooding worse. And finally, I just want to say there was a lot of discussion about this in Senate Natural Resources week before last about another bill that was asking for an exception on another river. And a lot of information came out that we don't have time to discuss here. But there is a process to evaluate whether a river like Comite River should be in the Scenic River.
All right.
So we don't believe this is the right way to do it, and continuing this, and we don't think it's needed to do the things that people say they want to do with the river. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And Emily, we do have a quick question by Vice Chair Orgeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there not already plans for any projects on these rivers in current status?
So as Mr. Sawyer already mentioned, I'm sure you can clarify if you'd like, but there are no project plans for the Comite. So it's unclear why this continues to be exempt, although as he stated, it was because they were already paired in the previous legislation. So they like to continue the pairing. To us, it doesn't make any sense why that has to happen.
All right. Thank you.
There are no further questions. Thank you, Vice Chair Orgeron. Thank you all so much for what you do and how important you are to this committee. All right. I have no other cards. That was all the ones in opposition. Representative Edmondson, if you wish to close.
Do you have any comments you want to make?
Okay.
Huh?
I do.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I think we just have a few brief comments. I'm sorry I said this was going to be short and simple. It didn't turn out that way, did it?
It's okay. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Brief closing
If it
comments,
pleases-
please.
If it pleases the committee, and I promise to go fast. First, I'll say that the statement that the scenic rivers did not cause flooding in the Amite River Basin is a breathtaking statement.
Yeah, it is.
Bayou Manchac alone flooded East Baton Rouge Parish, Ascension Parish, and Iberville Parish. The Comite River, if it were not a source of flood risk, there would not be a $1 billion U.S. Army Corps of Engineers flood control project on that river. To say that scenic rivers are not a source of flood risk, that's a breathtaking statement. With respect to these activities are allowed under current permitting, I've described to you that the permitting at LDWF has almost nothing to do with flood mitigation. It's a water body that's basically a museum, and we believe that. We embrace that. But we need to have the opportunity to mitigate flood risk in these areas, even in a very temporary manner. And then lastly, I will mention that the Amite River Basin, just like coastal Louisiana, just like the Ouachita Basin, Vermilion Teche, any major watershed in the state of Louisiana, they are dynamic systems. What happens over here affects what happens over there. And so to suggest that these scenic rivers are miraculously flood risk-free is just preposterous on its face. They are a source of flood risk. Everybody at this table, and I believe everybody in this room, want to protect these scenic rivers. We just need to be able to have a temporary moment to fix the problem.
Thank you very much. You have some quick closing comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very brief, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Look, again, I concur with what Mr. Sawyer has said, and I know the Comite River itself. Look, I grew up out there. I rode that river with four-wheelers, and it's beautiful, and we don't want to interrupt that. But he's absolutely correct in the fact that these small percentages, you talk about the studies that you've seen, and they brought up the study again a while ago and how it doesn't affect, by snagging and clearing, it doesn't affect it because it only does 0.3% or whatever small percentage it was. That small percentage downstream could mean a foot to 5 foot to somebody else whenever you snag and clear upstream and that water runs out. So that small percentage that they're talking about that says it's not going to make that big of a difference, it may not make a big difference right there at the top of the river, but it makes a big difference down to someone in Livingston Parish or the other side of East Baton Rouge Parish, or what water goes into Bayou Manchac by a foot to 5 foot easily. And that was what our study saw and did, and that's why we moved forward with it. So thank you all very much, and we ask for your approval to keep this in here.
All right, is there a motion from the committee that there are no further questions? There is a motion by Representative Carrier to move favorable on House Bill 172. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, House Bill 172 is reported favorable. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Thank you all
Mr.
so
Chairman,
much.
committee members.
Representative Chance Henry,